With everything that's happening in the Middle East driving up energy prices hour by hour, what if I told you the government could reduce your energy bills this week without building a single wind turbine, nuclear power plant, or a power station? In fact, there are three paperwork or policy changes that they could make today that would immediately lower your energy bills across the whole of the UK. And stick around to the end because I'll show you one bonus thing that could change the energy market rules forever. And it could have a massive effect. Yet they're too scared to do anything about it. Domestic energy bills in the UK currently incur a 5% VAT charge. Now, energy is a necessity. It's not a luxury. It's not like going on holiday or buying a new TV. We don't charge VAT on other necessities like food, but we do seem to think that for some reason, energy you can live without it, and therefore it is taxable. Removing VAT would immediately reduce every single household bill. Now, it would only reduce it by 5%, but when energy prices are going up day by day, 5% is a good start. And it would signal that the government understands its taxes are causing hardship day to day for people in this country. Government can change VAT policy quite quickly. It's already changed the VAT rules many times, and in fact, the current 5% is only a temporary measure. If nothing changes, that 5% rate will return to 20% in March 2027. Now, changing VAT rates does not require infrastructure changes. It doesn't require anything other than the Chancellor signing off on the reduction in the rate. And this could happen today. So the impact of such a change would be immediate. We would see a 5% reduction in our energy bills overnight. Now, the Treasury and the government are going to argue that it would be a loss of tax revenue. VAT on domestic energy raises a significant amount of money for the Treasury, and removing that would create a gap in government finances, and that would need to be filled through higher taxes elsewhere or reduced spending. Now, Treasury officials often argue that removing VAT benefits for all households equally, including high income households, means that the money could be better spent targeting those most in need. But they do worry really about setting policy precedent. Once VAT is removed from one category, it becomes politically much harder to resist calls from others to remove it from their sectors. Now, the counter argument is that government regularly adjusts VAT rates when there is a political will to do it. Examples include, during COVID, the temporary VAT cuts for the hospitality industry to help it get back on its feet. We zero rate essential goods and services, such as food and children's clothing. Energy could be treated the same way as a basic necessity. The revenue loss would be partly offset by the wider economic effect, with households having more disposable income, leaving consumers to spend that money somewhere else in the economy. So this is the first thing the government could do to reduce our energy bills. What's stopping them? Nothing but political will. Standing charges currently pay for network maintenance, policy costs, supplier failures, and system costs, but these charges are fixed regardless of how much energy you use. These charges are levied on you by private companies, but unlike other private companies, you don't get to choose to do business with them. There is exactly one DNO in your region, no competition, and they levy charges like the government levies taxes. So if they're levying them like taxes, why don't we just bite the bullet and pay for them out of general taxation? So this would just require a simple policy change. Move the costs of the standing charge, lock, stock and barrel, into general taxation. This would lower daily energy costs immediately, and it would help low energy users. Now let's talk about the pushback, because there would be a lot of pushback from the DNOs. If the government attempted to move charges into general taxation, there would almost certainly be legal cases from the DNOs, the distribution network operators. Likely DNO arguments would be around revenue stability. DNOs prefer standing charges because they provide predictable income. Remember, these are private companies. These companies make profits which go to their shareholders. So they have a predictable income stream regardless of how much electricity customers use. And the DNOs would then claim that by removing the standing charges, it would make it harder to finance long-term grid upgrades because investors prefer stable guaranteed income. In other words, investors will look at it and go, charges in the UK are very, very high. We can make a lot of money. Let's go and invest in that DNO. Now, these companies are regulated monopolies and their allowed revenue is already determined through the Ofgem price control process. The government could keep the regulated revenue allowance the same, collect the same costs through taxation instead of bills, and pay the network operators exactly what they do today. Although I think it would be fairer if they paid them what it actually costs to run the network, not the extra money that needs to then go to their shareholders. The grid would still be funded, it would simply be funded through a much more transparent and fair process. Now, today, your electricity bill includes many policy costs, such as renewable support schemes, energy efficiency programs, the capacity market, and social support schemes. And these all add significant costs to your electricity bill. This makes electricity artificially expensive when compared to gas. Now, government policy is we're trying to electrify heating and transport, but we're putting almost all of the policy costs onto the electricity bills. Now, what do you think would happen to the uptake of heat pumps if electricity was a fraction of the price it was today? If electricity roughly costs the same per kilowatt hour as gas, and a heat pump gives you 3.5 to 4 times as much heat for the same amount of energy, demand for heat pumps would explode overnight. If we reduce those electricity prices to the same price as gas, what do you think that would do to the uptake of electric vehicles? If it costs 1p a mile to drive your electric vehicle, we would have many, many more electric vehicles on the market. It's bold moves like this that change systems, not ministers worrying about what the Daily Mail might say tomorrow morning. We need to move these policy costs into general taxation. These would immediately lower your electricity prices and they would encourage electrification of the country. Now, if the government tried to move the policy costs off of the electricity bill, there would be pushback from government departments, the Treasury itself, and also parts of the energy industry. The government would argue that these costs were historically placed onto energy bills because it allows governments to fund major policy programs without visible increases in taxation. By putting the costs onto electricity bills, they could fund renewable energy support schemes, insulation programs, and social support tariffs, while avoiding that politically difficult tax rise that they all seem to be averse to. Parts of the energy industry prefer these costs to remain within the electricity bill system. And this is because funding is predictable and it flows automatically from suppliers. It's just a stream of revenue that comes into their accounts every single month. Energy bills should not be used to fund broad public policy. We don't fund childcare policy through supermarket bills, or healthcare through pharmacy receipts, or education through school uniform prices. Those things are funded through general taxation because they're societal choices. Now, the real reason that the government likes to push these policy costs onto your electricity bills is it stops the Chancellor having to stand up in the House of Commons and say, we've got this new policy where we need to fund something, and for that we need to raise your taxes by 1 penny in the pound. It's much easier to do it stealthily and just push these onto your electricity bills. You're paying for it just the same, but it's much more transparent if it was done through general taxation. The UK electricity market uses what is known as marginal pricing. That means that when all the different energy providers bid to have their energy pushed into the grid, the price that is paid to them is set by the most expensive source. And that is most often than not gas. Even when electricity is generated by wind or solar, gas still sets the price. Now let me give you an analogy. It would be like going into a supermarket to buy apples and bread, but because the shop also sells champagne, everything in the shop is priced like champagne. It sounds crazy, doesn't it? But that's exactly how the UK energy market is set up. Consumers pay gas prices for renewable electricity. So how can the government fix this? Well, there is a really simple fix, is split the electricity market into two pools. Instead of having one price for it all, have two separate prices. Have a pool for renewables, and maybe incorporate nuclear into that, and another pool for gas and what are known as backup generators. So we separate the cheaper forms of electricity from the more expensive. And the cheaper forms of energy, such as wind and solar, can be brought to market at much lower prices. That means that they will bring that average price down, and therefore you will pay less for your electricity. Now, the government and regulators argue that marginal pricing is economically efficient because it ensures the cheapest generators run first, and the logic is that generators bid into the market, the cheapest electricity is dispatched first, and the most expensive generators are only used when needed. However, they set the demand price. So it's an easy system to manage, and it is economically efficient. And this economically efficient system is making our electricity in the UK some of the most expensive in the world. Now, their argument is that if you break marginal pricing, you risk distorting the market and making electricity dispatch less efficient. Well, the system is already broken today. Now, marginal pricing worked well for most generators when they have similar costs. When we had coal-fired power stations and gas plants, it worked well. But today the energy system has changed. Today the grid includes wind, solar, nuclear, and hopefully at some point in the future, maybe even tidal. And these have much lower operating costs once the system is built. So the system now produces a very strange outcome. Cheap renewable energy is paid for as if it is the most expensive source, gas. The market structure was designed for a fossil fuel system, not a renewables heavy system. Everything I've described in this video are real policy changes that could reduce energy bills today. They don't require new infrastructure, new power stations, or waiting decades for the outcome of surveys. They are simple policy decisions that somebody in charge could make today and start to implement today. But until these changes happen, households are increasingly solving the problems themselves. Solar, batteries, smart tariffs allow people like myself to effectively take ourselves out of that mix. But that doesn't help the 99.9% of people out there who are currently paying some of the highest energy prices in Europe. If the government really wanted to cut our energy bills, they could do this tomorrow. They already have the tools to do it. So Ed Miliband, over to you. You need to act now, or you're going to be consigned to history at the next general election. Anyway, that's my thoughts for today. Let me know in the comments what you think below. I'm sure everyone's going to jump in and say, well, we couldn't do that because of this. I'd love to know what you think. With that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you very much for clicking on this video. It means the world to me. And if I'm lucky, I'll see you back here real soon for another video. Take care. Bye-bye.